Hi there, just about to go live. Hopefully those of you there that can see me, just feel free to pop a comment on the, I'll just cut here. Hello. Get that ticker off. This is Gavin Taylor here from GT Dobro Lessons Online. Live to Facebook just now. This will get reposted on YouTube and sundry others maybe. I can see we've got some viewers today, that's really great. Do feel free to post a comment or two on there. Hello, is it Andre? With a little scoop on the R. Hello. So today's lesson is going to be about forward and reverse slants and some material. It'll probably take me about an hour and a bit to get through the whole material, so feel free to obviously come back and review it afterwards. There is a link in the description. It's certainly on my page if you can't find it to the resources that we'll be using. We've got a backing track. We've got a couple of charts from guitarscientist.com that go over materials, and then a PDF of a song to go over. We've got a Silent Night as a backing track to go over. It's a really good simple melody to go over. It's all primary chords, and so it's good, easy to review our chord forms through it. So I think without further ado, I'll give you a little play noodle along with it, and then come back and introduce the materials that we're going. So this is just a kind of introduction to the backing track. Do drop a message if the volumes are all kind of skew with, as I can't monitor the outgoing feed while I'm doing this just now. I can see that, well, hopefully I can see the audio's going out anyway. Okay, without further ado. Slants, and I'll just carry on with an improvisation. I've just realised I've not even turned the camera onto the Dobro as I'm playing away. So I just stopped there. My apologies about that. Usually I'm slightly more observation about that. Hope you could hear the sounds okay. Now I've pressed buttons. Technical deficits. So I'll just cut to the shot that you can actually see this slide. Sorry about that. Do feel free to post up if you're watching and you see me not putting the appropriate information up on the screen while I'm chatting away. What we'll see, we can put a two-shot up. I'll just compose it first of all. Two-shot, or picture-in-picture, that's what we'll use. Picture-in-picture. There we go, and get rid of that titling. Okay, and then I can put that camera on there. So my apologies about that. Put this camera where it needs to be. In fact, I can keep that title up just so anyone enjoying knows what the hell's going on. Okay, so I'll just do a little further noodle as yeah, so you can hear what's going on. See if we can get that slightly out of shot. There we go. Sorry about that. little bit out there, wasn't it? I was getting my positions wrong. Okay, since I've done a fair bit of noodling so far, let's get on with the lesson plan. Apologies as the... hi Pat Dennis from the UK, I believe. Nice to see you. If you know any Doborists around Pat, do feel forward to send the link forward. I'm just putting myself back on the camera there. So, what we're going to do now is go through some of the lesson plan. Now, as an introduction, I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit about my relationship to the slants, as they're a relatively difficult technique to. So I've been playing the instrument for maybe about 14 years and really deferred looking at slants for a long time. I use Open G, GBD, GBD, and at the beginning, moving from guitar, I've been played a long time, managed to find a good relationship between moving to the dobro and just melodic playing. A lot of tilt playing, so playing single notes. I'm feeling quite good about, enjoying playing the instrument like that. But really the whole twist in the hand business for the slants kind of gave that a miss for quite a while. So gradually started finding ways to get used to doing it, watching players and getting used to it. However, it wasn't really till a couple of years ago that I started to have to get a bit more concentrated into it with students and coming up with some materials to teach with it. So I've not got a long history in terms of using it. So some of this process, it helps me kind of use the ideas that I've been doing and get better at them. On lap steel, I'm a bit more comfortable. In C6, the breadth of the slants that you have to do aren't quite so dim. Anyway, that's a kind of preface to my relationship to these slants. So we'll look at some of the materials. First of all, I'm just going to go over the hand positions that I use. So I'll cut back to the fretboard here. Okay, so with this slant here, I'll just cut to the two shot again. Picture in picture. With this hand here, the slide hand, you'll see a couple of different techniques. Okay, in fact, I'll just get this one back. You'll see a couple of techniques with this forearm. Some keep the hand position integral and move the wrist, keep this hand very flush to it. Okay, so there's a lot of this position that we'll see, but essentially the thumb staying and the forefinger staying in exactly the same relationship as they're doing it, and having to contort the upper body. If I just show you some of the kind of characteristics of doing that. If I want to do, I'll go over in the diagrams later, if I want to do, say, this forward slant here, you can see I've got my wrist has come back this way from my resting position. I've moved out. Okay. Now that's quite an easy slant to do, really, but I've had to move my arm quite a lot. So for, say, one of these more sheer ones, and in the middle of the range of this neck, this is still quite an easy one. For something like that, you can see how far my hand's going. Now if I try and do one of these down here at the bottom of the fretboard, there's a lot of motion. So these are what we call forward slants. The tip of the slide is moving towards the bridge. And my elbows are kind of gone out, or reverse slants this way. So with this technique, you have to kind of pull the elbow into the body, almost turn the neck. You'll see players doing this as well, turning the neck away from their body so that they can get this angle there. So a reverse slant here, for instance. Okay, a little bit of the F chord. I've got A and F, A on the bottom there. Okay, so quite an acute position for quite, you know, a middle of the fretboard kind of slide. So that technique requires quite a lot on the dobro here. Now, that's because the slides really here are most dealing with jumping over one string, so one string apart. So say if I'm doing them on the bottom 3 strings, I'm doing the G string and the D string, say. Okay. Now if you're on C6, the tuning might mean that you're doing sixths across slightly wider. There's 2 strings in between them. That changes the acute nature of the angle. Okay, so this sort of shape isn't too difficult on a pedal steel and a lap steel for a lot of the slides, because you've got more strings between the angles that you're needing to cut through. Yeah, so when I'm talking about, I'll just cut here. So you see here, you know, see if we can get the angle right. So if I'm playing strings here on the dobro, it's quite cute, but on the lap steel, you'd be doing things like that, so there'd be 2 strings in between. So a little easier on the other hand. Okay, so we've got these forward and reverse slants. So the other technique that you'll see people using, and you see people using the combination of these, and on lap steels as well in C6, is this. So lifting the wrist up and letting this slide come into the palm, and you're kind of pivoting it between your fingers. You're twisting it in there. So I've got still control on my first finger on the top, and you're pivoting in the middle. Okay, and there's a variety of different ways to kind of orientate where you're pivoting on, depending on what you might do. Certainly this is a technique that I've seen others kind of using, where it's not this position, but it's into the palm. Now it's more precarious. You've got less control of the weight of the slide. So moving the forearm around has its problems for the physics of the body to move around, but you've got a good control of the slide. This objective weight in your hand isn't getting sort of moved around, whereas moving it in your hand, you can see my forearm isn't actually having to do anything, but I've got a slightly more precarious point of contact with that. This finger isn't gripping like that anymore, you know, where you've got a nice solid contact. For today, you'll probably see me doing mostly like this, moving between this way, okay? And hopefully I won't lose control of it, okay? But yeah, so let's dive into, that's a little bit about the sort of hand position there, about the hand positions that we use and the variety that you'll see. So the first thing that we're going to do, I think, is cover where the slants come from in terms of the tuning on the instrument. And the basic forms that we've got for that. So if we shall cut to 2-shot, and I shall do, rather than this configuration, I'll just put the sheet music up in the main picture, get rid of that. I can remember which button's supposed to do this. It's the 3-shot. No. Oh, it's 2-shot. There we go. And the other one will be, oh, wrong one. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to find, this should be in the drive. Okay, so this one here is just the basic triads, working in C today. Sometimes work in G for beginners, and sometimes in C. I think C is a good place to start, as much as G. You know, the instrument's tuned to G, so that makes most sense a lot of the time to do that. The backing track's in C, and C is always just a good orientation. Starting from learning the fretboard without any flats or sharps, whereas you start with sharps or flats with a beginner, they tend to make some orientation. You know, can be, because you've got a sharp in the key already, it can make some complexity moving forward. Either way, I start both ways in C and G depending on the criteria. Today we're working in C. So what we've got here is the sort of primary chord forms for our tuning. You know, every stringed instrument with its tuning has got a way in which the triads are laid out across a set of strings. And when I say that, the closest way that you can get root third, fifth on consecutive strings. Now, sometimes when you've got strings tuned in fifths, you end up with chord forms that might just go jump parallel across fifths. We don't. It's nicely tuned in thirds with one set of fourths. And either way, the forms that we're orienting, I'll just go through this sheet again. So these are the major triads on the dobro: C, F, and G. So I'm just concerning myself today with the major triads. Okay. First, just get used to them on the top 3 strings. You can see because of the repeated tuning, they're very symmetrical, if you like. Whatever happens on the bottom 3 strings happens on the top 3 strings. So I'll go through them, starting on the kind of straight line one at the 5th fret here that says C. Okay. Straight line across the bridge there. Okay. In fact, I'll cut to a 3 shot at this point to illustrate that. Didn't want that to come up. Okay, so swap the cameras round. Losing my mind. So put camera 2 on my neck, just so you can see that. So with this position here, got the straight line across there, and that's root, 3rd, 5th. Now I'm just going to work on the top 3 strings. I'm going to be trying quite brief because there's a lot of materials to get through. So I've got root, 3rd, 5th here. Okay. So if I play the 2 of the strings together. Sorry, the sound just disappeared there for a second. Not sure what part of the system failed there. Anyway, we're back. So I can play 2 strings and get 3rd, major 3rd there, or a minor 3rd there. Okay, so it's built into the chord form. The next one up that you can see that says 3, 5, 1 is an inversion. Now it's not straight. I can't play all 3 notes in any way with a straight line. However, I can play the outer 2 notes, the 3rd and the root together. Okay, as a slant. Okay, you can see my thumbs just tucked in together. I've tilted it, slanted it like this into my hand. You can see the tip of the base of the slide is in my palm now. It might not look like my hands come up so much because they're quite easy to do once you've got the technique, this type of slant. Okay, so there's the 5th and the root present themselves as an easy slant to do there in that form. If we move up the fretboard, or if I zoom out a little bit, I'll do this up at the 12th fret. We can see the 5, 1, 3, 5th root 3rd. Now that's a diagonal line across the fretboard, so I can just try and place the slide across them. And I had to use a bit of intonation to tilt the slide so they get all 3 notes in some way in semblance. Usually I find in context with something playing along, I've got a better chance of just sliding straight to it. The intuitive musical skills are there. But either way, what I wouldn't necessarily do, and you'll hear players do it all the time, is to play all 3 notes together, 5th root 3rd. I'll generally use the 6th, and we'll come on to discussing that, but the outer 2 notes of this particular configuration, the 5th and the root. Okay, so what you're seeing there is moving through up the fretboard using, or down the fretboard, using a bit of this inversion, the outer strings, a bit of that. So I'm playing up and down the same chord going through the forms. Now I'd suggest you do that. So this sheet has got all the 3 different chords that are there. So you can see each one looks the same. It's just starting in a different part on the fretboard. One of them's C, one of them's F, one of them is G, and I've been slack and not even titled the G. But that should be noted and relatively obvious to those. There, I say relatively obvious. These materials are meant for beginners, so that's a bit of a failing. I might update that and update it. Okay, so let's move on to the next kind of chart. Did I mean to go to that one? Okay, so here is the same information, just developed on a little bit, showing moving through thirds as slants. Okay, so on the screen there, you can see there are 3 notes, just like we saw before, but one of them's in light blue. I'm really only playing the darkened notes here. Have I got anything that I should read out of that? Here we see major thirds, just looking at the text here. Here we see major thirds of the key, C, F, G, using thirds and sixths. Sixths are further down the page. To keep things brief, so I'll give you, and to give you a challenge, I've not put every string combination for each chord. as each chart just needs to be moved or transposed, much like I was saying on the previous diagram, on the same strings to play the remaining options for the C, Fs and Gs. The first diagram shows major thirds for the C chord on the top two strings. So you should be able to move these around as appropriately to get the F chord on three forms and G. So these first slants here are down the bottom here. It's quite, even with it into your palm, you're having to make a very, very acute slant. I wish I could just play it, have a C in the background so I can get my intonation here. Okay. Now, generally when I play slants, generally I don't play slants down here because I find them very difficult to easily move in and out from in terms of improvisation. Okay. Also, the contact with the strings, I don't like the tonality of it down here. But either way, I'd use this up at the 12th fret happily. Okay, so we've got this one where we've got the root and the third of that inversion, because that inversion goes 5th root 3rd. You can just see it just slightly off to the side of the page. Okay. Then we've got our straight bar slant where we're getting this minor third from E to G, missing out the root. Okay, and then we've got the difficult one. Okay, which is a perfect fourth, playing from the 5th of the chord G to C on top. Okay, so it's quite an acute slant. Whoa, and you can see I'm swinging cats trying to get that there. The contact that I'm making on the B string there is making that zangy sound. So again, not a slant that I particularly use, and that's not going to be in the diagrams because getting to and from it, I'm just going to swing cats. It's not something I'm going to use. Players out there, I'm sure, have more ability than I am in terms of this will do that. I've just noticed one of the cameras going out of sync there. I hope that hasn't been like that for ages. Hopefully that's us back in sync. Nope. Just do the same to the other camera. And hopefully things back in sync. I should have checked that before I started. Hey Julie Brown, nice to see you. So do drop any questions if there's anyone out there that's into dobro or slants and wants to. If you missed something, I can go over something again. Okay, so it's just saying there that out of this inversion, where I'm going 3rd, 5th root, the outer slant, which I did earlier, nice and comfortable and easy to use. For me, getting this 5th up to the root, this acute perfect 4th jump, I'm just not going to get there successfully, so I never use it. As I say, caveat, other players may be using them successfully a lot more regularly. Same chord forms here, and just to go back. Notice there all the slants were forward on those strings out of how we're having to play them. Okay, they were all forward slants or parallel. In this case, on same chord forms, but we're now looking at F. When I say chord forms, it's still major chord, but it's moved. Your F is up here now, like the parallel is. Okay, so you'll notice here they've got forward and reverse slants. Here's a reverse slant right at the bottom, and again you can see that I'm having to kink quite heavily down the bottom to get this slant. Okay, so I've got that there. Then I have to go to a forward slant to get the root and the 5th and the root here. Now that's the same inversion that I was having problems here, and I'm getting that horrible sound, but on these strings I can get a nice contact with it, and it's not such an acute slant, so usable for me. And then we're back to a parallel, and back to, there's a bit of the chart that I thought I had fixed, but I hadn't, where it says G and C up the top. Obviously it's A and C up there. Okay, on to the next. So these are moving into sixths. Okay, sixths should be thought of as inverted thirds, i.e. if you've got C on the bottom and E above, C, E, then if you pop, that's a third, C, D, E, and if you swap those round, so you're going from E up to C, it's a sixth. Not going to get too dragged into it further than there, but in this case, it's got the chord G that I'm going through, okay, and I've got the 5th, and up to the 3rd here. Well, that's my audio popping out again, back and again. Hopefully something that isn't terribly going to go wrong today. Okay, so there it is on the open strings or at the 12th fret. Okay, the next one out of these forms, and notice it's the same shapes. If you just look at the top 3 strings, you can see the same shapes that we had. We've just added in the D string to allow that. Okay, so whatever is up on the top D string is also on the lower D string. So there's this harder one that we were talking about, where you're going from the root to a fifth. Where fourths and fifths are generally going to be the bigger leaps. So there's that fifth, quite a severe slant. Again, not one that I use regularly. Doable, but not one that I use regularly. Just, you can see my hand is having to contort so far to get that position. You know, this second finger has had to slip round to the knuckle. You know, so there's far more likelihood in the moment that I'm not going to stay in control. Okay, so as we come up there, we've got this one, far more usable. Okay, that knuckle has still had to my knuckle has still had to go behind to do it, but I still feel that I'm sort of I'm still in control of that. So when I say that, it's always coming round a bit, you know, like that, but in this case it's going round more. Now, in terms of dampening and all sorts of things, I really want to try and improve my technique to get my thumb to stay low while the rest of the hand goes high, so I'm touching strings here to stop things ring. I do that when I'm doing forward slants, but with my reverse slants, I'm looking to improve my technique there. But either way, there's my G. And then the really acute one that I swung cats like hell there. Let's move on. No need to swing more cats than we need to. And here we've got the last one. I'm just going to have to cut to that chart by itself as it pops off the end of the page otherwise. So that one, we've got C. I wonder if I can just pop it on a 2-shot actually. Picture in picture should do. Yeah. So here I've got C at the bottom. Oh, my G string's just gone out. I changed the string not so long ago. So I'm wanting camera 2. No, that's... Sorry about this, I've still not quite figured out this interface that I've made. Come on. There we go. So, that's not quite a slant. I'll get a tuner out in just a sec and get this beast back into tune. I tend to go through a hell of a lot of G strings. So I replace that. I'll live with that. Okay. So we'll see this one up the fretboard later on as a slant up at the 12th fret. And then we've got our nice simple one. So we're back to C in terms of the chord form that we're using here. Okay. And then we've got a forward slant here. And then we've got this reverse slant. So these sixths are, they're going to use both forward and reverse slants. Okay, so final diagram. Just weak off my fingers. Is this one. Okay, I'll just kind of talk through this because we really need to get cracking onto the backing track. Here we've got... Oops, sorry, I thought I had configured a shot earlier that would do this adequately, but it seems I've not. So here we're just seeing a compilation of just what we've done, except we're seeing it as a sort of scale form, moving up through the fretboard. Now maybe I'll play through some of these because these are rather than them just being individual chords, they're moving through the scale form. So, well, that's the audio popping out again. So that's the thirds up on the top string there. I'll just do it along with the backing track and use those a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try and jump around up to the appropriate chord forms on these thirds. And we'll hear the melody there. That's G. Back to C, F, C, G, oh sorry, it's F again, can hear moving around. I'll just kind of move around a bit more fluidly in a linear fashion. Sorry, went out of key there. So you can hear, you can move around with those. I just made some mistakes up in the middle bit there. Okay, you should be able to do these on these strings and the ones lower down there. Hey, John Paul. So there is those thirds. As I said, you should be able to do those on the D, the lower B and D string. These thirds you can do on multiple strings. The sixths that are stuck in the middle, you really only got one set for them. Okay, so if we move up to these ones, these are with it again the thirds on these lower strings between the G and the B strings. So you can see you've got more consistent reverse slants where you're having to make this position. Okay, parallel and back that way. No forward slants in these thirds. So let's just go through them. Okay, let's see if I can swing some cats here. Not too bad. Little bit of a swing of a cat there. I'm hearing lots of bassless. As I was saying earlier, the deficit that I've got with this technique is the control to touch strings on the bass there. I need to use more of my palm as I'm going around there to try and stop, but you're still getting this sound, even though I've damped here, the slide sound there. Whereas if you manage to get a string, you know, on this hand, manage to get the thumb in any way below, which is the advantage of this style of slant, okay, I can move that slide around, but these strings are just not going to ring as you move around. It's just the thumb sound. As opposed to that metal sound, when the thumb's on it, it's far less noise. So with this technique, I'm going to have to sort of work on my technique to try and get this hand to try and touch some strings as I'm going through it. And that's not acute enough. So we'll see with the backing track, we can hear some tuning issues with that. It keeps popping out, that audio. That's the wrong ones. So you get the idea there, and you can see the hand position there. I'm having to come in a lot with my forearm into my body to get those ones. Yeah, that's the ones there. So the next diagram is these six up on the top ones. Use these ones a lot. Okay, they're nice and these ones should be the first that you get really comfortable in terms of sixth. Sorry. Okay, so just in case this diagram is remotely confusing, the thirds seem to be optically a bit more clear. Obviously, you're playing the slanted ones. There's no parallel sixths here. Parallel thing here on these strings would be a fifth, and we're looking at sixths. Okay, so it's always like, say, F and A, B and G, C and A, D and B, C and E, F and D, and G and E up at the top, just in case you're kind of wondering. So it's the color combinations, but occasionally optically that can be slightly, some people might be confused with that. Okay, so we'll hear these sixths moving around with the backing track there. That's this one, this C up there. You get that into shot. And back in G. That's the F. Should be doing that, should be there. Okay, Okay, so I'm ended up going back to following the chord forms rather than moving up. So I'll just do that again and just try and move horizontally, you know, up and down through these sixths. That's a fifth. Okay, so there's a little development of that, and then we're on to these ones. These are going to be reverse slants, okay? Parallel, parallel, reverse, reverse, parallel, parallel, reverse. So just go through those. Okay, so quite usable. And finally, can I keep on this page? No, as with the other diagram, I'm going to have to cut to the sparkle here. I don't know why I'm saying sparkle. That's a bit of technology I had called sparkle that was on that channel. Just cut to this wee laptop. Okay, so these are forward slants up on these bottom ones, the bottom diagram there. Have I still got my two-shot? Yes, I do. So that's my C and A. Yeah, my B and D. Okay, so those forms. Is this still? I think that's still in sync. I usually don't go out that fast. Okay, so those were just all forward slant 6 on the B and the D string. So that takes us to the end of that part of the lesson. So that's really the introduction to all the slant positions that we've got on the dobro in the GBD's tuning. Okay, as far as I'm aware, there aren't more. Okay, not sixths and thirds. You've got other. So in between there, we looked at some that were fourths and fifths. Sometimes when you're going through a triad, you're going from the fifth up to the root. So we'd seen a couple of those. That's a fourth interval, okay? Or the other way around, where you're going from the root up to a fifth. There's a fifth. So as we move through the chord form diagrams, where you were moving up through strings just playing C, okay, you obviously move through all the combinations that are inside a chord. So that's going to have major, minor, thirds, which are sixths upside down, and then you're going to get fourths and fifths. Okay, that's if you're just staying inside the chord. Whereas what we've just done is just moving up and down sixths through the scale. Okay, up and down a set of strings. So with the materials that we're going to do, I'll just refresh these cameras as I'm just seeing a little blip now and again. So we're going to move on to looking at some gremlins on the system today. Not usually get these big audio dropouts. Anyway, let's persevere. So I've got the chart, if I can just remember which window is open here. Okay, so I cut to that. We'll introduce the material, get rid of that. Okay, so I've got three little arrangements from that. I only wrote these yesterday, well, the first two of them. The last one I wrote as an introduction to a student a while ago. Hey Hugh, nice to see you. So we're going to go through this Silent Night. So I only did these yesterday, so some of them are a bit kind of not necessarily freshest in my brain. I'm just going to start this other tablet that I've got to the side here, so I can see the whole chart as I'm playing through the examples. As the screen that you're seeing, I can't fit the whole thing on. So just give me a second there. Ka-clong, ka-plang. And we're back. Apologies about that. Rather fuzzy hair. Get my hairband back on. There we go. Back into a slightly more dignified look. So we'll walk through this, and hopefully my other tablet will stay awake. So the first one we can see here is that the first 4 bars are all in C. So we're largely playing C inversions, and then they pass into F. So there's little momentary steps out of C into essentially forms that we could see as part of F. So this chart on this other device is just taking an age to open up. Hope the internet's still okay with it. That's the wrong chart. Sorry, give me a moment just to get this correct chart open. There we go. Okay, so we've got this one that's on the B and the D strings, B and G. I'll just cut to the 3 shot for this. And there we go. And the camera onto the Dobro. And the camera onto the Dobro. We're having technology fails here. Another one of these. Oh, pressing the right button would help. Okay. So here we've got this our slant. Here's C down at the 5th fret. And you can see that's not where it's played. It's played up here where you've got G and E. So I've got the 5th stepping up to the 3rd. My chord position, my triad here is 3rd, 5th, root, 3rd, 5th, root. Okay. Then up to the 10th fret to get this parallel form of A and F together. So that's where the motif starts. And then you can see we slide down. One thing to say about these charts is that I haven't put any slide indication on them. They're there as the forms of 6th and 3rds that we can use, and it's really up for you to interpret where you'd like to slide or otherwise. They're just demonstrations of using them as best as I think is helpful for a training material to work through. So there's a lot of horizontal motion on the same sets of strings. They're not necessarily the easiest options sometimes, but they're ones designed to kind of make you work through the forms, or make me, because as I say, half of this is about a drive to use this particular lesson plan to give myself something more regimented to learn using slants. Okay, so these 2 forms are entirely C. Okay, the G and E, which is the 8th fret and the 9th fret on the B and the D strings, G and strings, and then parallel 5ths. And there's this little F that comes in between them. Okay, so there's our first line. Okay, then we're jumping up to G, the parallel one, and we jumped up to the D and the B strings. A little bit off camera there. And we're going down to its next chord form. So this is still G. Okay, this inversion is 5th root 3rd, 5th root 3rd, and I'm using the 3rd and the root above it. That's that reverse slant there. Okay, so there's the first reverse slant that we've got of it. Okay, because the other one was a forward slant, wasn't it? 2 parallels and 1 forward slant. Reverse slant. Okay. And then I've continued that line by using the same form. So we're going to move this hand position up here and over a set of strings to play C. So this is the same chord form actually that we've got with inside this chord form, this inversion of 5th root 3rd, 5th root 3rd. We've got 2 reverse slants possible. Up on the D and the B strings, I've got E, the 3rd to the root, and if I move down 1 fret and over a set of strings, I get the root up to the 5th. Okay, so there's a 5th and there's a 6th, but the hand position is the same. Okay, so I've moved from here with the 3rd of G up to the root to here where I've got the root of C and the 5th of C, and down to the next form of C on those strings where I've got 5th up to the 3rd. Remember, those are the forms of C there. Okay, so that line, reverse slant, same form up here, forward slant. Okay, so there's that line. And then this next line gets repeated. We're going back to the same slant that we used for G here, and we're just moving that down to C. So again, this is using this 5th root 3rd, 5th root 3rd form. Okay, and we're starting there, and we're going to ascend up, okay, through the little scale form of 6ths, passing through what might be a G to the parallel F form, and back down, back to our C refrain that we used at the beginning. Okay. So it doesn't go up through those, does it? It jumps. But as it comes back down there, it moves down through those 6ths. So here, those are all 6 descending down that we would have seen on the diagram page before. So that gets played twice. And then we get bar 17. We're back up to these 12 frets. Now this is the only point where we've gone kind of off diagram. Hey Alistair. This is the only point that's off the diagrams, because we've got a G7 here, and occasionally we're going to have an F in G7. Now, I just noticed that the transcription here is... what's wrong with that? Oh no, nothing. I was just looking at the wrong bar. So here we've got G, 12th fret normally. The 6th that I'm using is between D and B, the 5th stepping up to the 3rd. But when it's up here at that 15th fret, this F on the bottom of that is the 7th. It's the flat 7th. And we've got the 5th there. So this is actually from our 3rd, 5th root, 3rd, 5th root chord form. Or B, D, G, B, D, G. And we're using that D here. But in that, we've got this flattened 7th there. That gives us our dominant chords. So that's the one element that's kind of off-piste from the materials that we've got on the other materials in the that are provided. Okay, so G7s, we'll see a couple of those F ones that are they're in the 6th vocabulary, but they're not. If you were trying to find them as relative to the major chord, well, it hasn't. None of the diagrams are provided have got the 7th in them for the chord functions. Just the primary triads, just so far. Okay, so this part of the refrain to carry on with. So far, that's all been G, but G7. G, G7, back to G, back to a tilt form of G there, or slant form of G, okay, where we get the 3rd and the root up the top. Sorry. Okay, and then I've given us a... I thought I had corrected this one. I think we're looking at a the wrong version of this chart. And just give me a moment because I replaced them in the Dropbox. Ah, we did. I just haven't opened them in this device yet. Let me just take the moment to get this done properly. So, oops. The Dropbox files that you had, if you got them there, should be correct. It's just on this little device here. I haven't downloaded the corrected ones. So the notation was right. It's just these particular charts need updated because on the secondary little laptop I've neglected to download the new ones that were corrected. So there you saw some numbers for that last part of the refrain that are incorrect. So let me just make sure I download the correct PDF on this device. Let's go into, should be that one. You opened this one today. Let's be having you. Oh, joy of tech. Bring on the neural implants so I don't have to turn around and press screens. It's just freezing. Right, let's see if we can go into the folder. Momentary success. I'm going to say it's you. Sorry about this delay. Let's download it and open it in Adobe. Might as well get the time right so that the actual lesson's got the right materials in it. Going funnily out of focus. There we go. And oh no, that's the wrong chart. That's for the lap steel. Oh, come on. Must be you. Okay, get in there. Sorry about this delay. I'll just put the backing track on to keep you entertained, I guess. Maybe noodle around while I half look at the Dobro, half look at this little laptop. Something interesting while this is going on. Finally there. Okay, so let's stop that. So you can see in this tab the end of these lines say fives and not odd numbers that we don't want to use. There we go, and it's this G7 line. Sorry, I was at the wrong line there. Small on that. Okay, and it's the last refrain on this that we were looking at. So it's come from the 12th fret, up 15th fret, back through the 12th fret, the reverse slant for B and G. Okay, and then we're going back to the 5th fret for C, and a forward slant up to the 3rd and the root there, from our 3rd, 5th root inversion. So that line again. Okay, then finally our last line here. Okay, we're going to use two forms like I was talking before. Inside this fifth root third form, we've got two reverse slants, one between the third stepping up to the root and one from the root stepping up to the fifth. This is just this arpeggio stepping down through the C chord to a forward slant on the same stretch of strings, that 8 and 9, the G and E. Okay, then we turn and we're jumping to G at the same part of the fretboard now with that reverse slant. Scale, jump down there to the same thing that we had up at the 15th fret, which is the D and the F for G7. Just turn it down so you can see that's played over G7. Then back to C. Okay, so that line. So there's a couple of technical things here, now that we've gone through it, of where you might be doing gestures like this. Turning, okay. One of the things I'd suggest that I use is we're trying to keep this hand something touching the strings all the time, okay. Okay, but as we're moving, we don't want this slide to just be making these kind of sounds. So we're lifting and placing and trying to minimize that sound. When I've got this reverse slant there, and fourth slant, as I was saying earlier, trying to use the thumb in front of this on the bass strings that are not getting played, say, is a technique. Now, this is something that I've not fully kind of evolved yet. When I'm doing these ones, my thumb is tucked behind, and I'm generally keeping it's nice and easy to keep it very flat on the strings, so that it's touching bass strings, and that stops an amount of this bass noise if you can keep the thumb on that in contact with the strings. Either way, you're trying to keep this part of the hand flat there. Now, this is what I'm saying to do. As you might watch through it, I'm sure I shall make lots of from errors for it. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, what shall I do? I'm going to play through the chart. I think I'll just cut to me playing a shot and the backing track so you can see it. You can download if you haven't yet, all the materials from the link in the description, so you could potentially view along with that if you've got two devices. But I'll keep it's helpful for prosperity to see me playing through it rather than the chart and smaller things. So let me just make sure I've got my composed two shot. There we go, and cut to that. Okay, so I'm going to play that chart now. I'm going to just position myself so I can see the PDF that I'm reading from. Yeah, okay, so here's this first page of the arrangement. Just missed that last bit. I'll try and do that again. Where have I gone there? Back to my Fs. Forgetting one more time. there. So I managed to get around it at least the last time pretty successfully. Trying not to look up at the chart and just remember the bits that I've written. My mind is not as good at remembering things sometimes as I would like it. Okay, so we're going to cut to the next form of the next page 2 of the chart, and this is really just an inversion of the melody. Largely, the melody is on the bass for this one. I've made the occasional kind of adaptation for musical kind of requirements. So here we've got these same strings that we worked on. Here we worked on, when we started the melody, we did here. Same 2 strings that we started on. But previously we started with these 6ths here between G stepping up to E. And step down there. Here we're starting on that one. And as we move up, technically this is not F. Okay, because it's got a D in it. The melody is really on the bass. So, just so that we've got that sort of sense of the same motion happening, I've put the 6th in there. Whereas here, that's specifically C to F back to C. In this case, that's not. Okay, this could be perceived as part of G7, D minor, a variety of things, but it's not F. Okay, F at that point would be a reverse slant. So you could think of it just as a scale motion there. Okay, so our initial motif is all played here. Okay, now even simple motions like that, we can, there's things that to get nice. That's where there's no blocking, no lifting, nothing. There's a lot of extraneous motion. Now you might want that sound to just to spend a moment to be able to get all the intonations nicely with it, but practicing them as if they were almost like fretted sounds is a good one, just to ensure that you're trying as best you can to get the mechanical memory of shapes right the first time. When you do slides, the beauty about that is you've always got a forgiving nature, because your musical intuition, your ear, can guide you and just turn things back into the correct sound. Or certainly they should be. If you're out of tune, you should be adapting and correcting as best you can. So practicing just making things dry, crisp sounds, ensures that your actual gesture and the angle in which you're assuming you should be going to, whether it's visually kind of you're looking at an angle down here, and you're for each instrument, depending on how high the strings are, that can be slightly different. But the angle of your hands should pretty much, and every dobro should be pretty much the same for whatever type of slide you're doing. So doing exercises like as opposed to is equally helpful. Okay, so there's the first refrain with a little bit of rambling beyond it. Okay, so on to the second line. Here's our G7. Oh, hello, we've got some more people. Sorry, I hadn't said hello to Fiona. Hi, Fiona. Yeah. Don't think there's any new viewers. Well, there's 4 of you watching. Hello to 4 of you. Okay, so we're on to our G7 here. Now this isn't, there's no 7th in it, it's just the root up to the 5th, that perfect 5th. Okay. Stepping down to the 5th and the 3rd. So these are both G. Okay. Okay. There's the sort of things that if you just played them easily, you might do something like that. That's an upper register. But here we've got root, 5th, which could be okay, but here we've written it. And then C's, all nice and simple. Okay, so a little reprieve there. Okay, so that's a nice simple one there. And then our F line that gets repeated from our 5th root 3rd. Okay, and then we're jumping up to the same reverse slant in the same chord form. Now there you could see me using this hand position At this point in the neck, I'm not feeling too compromised. If it's up here, my body starts to really contort. This part of the neck with those ones, I've got space to do some. But you'll see me using both forms. I'll probably end up just doing these ones. But a lot of extraneous noise as I made that. I want a nice clean jump. See all that extra noise? Oh, got to sort that out. So that's finger blocking on this hand, putting something on the strings as you're moving so that you're not getting all that excess noise. So I'm doing the lift here, fingers on the back, but this hand has to do some blocking, i.e. stopping strings ringing, so we're not getting that type of sound. So there's that riff down to there. Where did I put the next bit? Back to our fives. The same as we did for the opening reprieve, the opening theme. So we get, got to do that blocking. Okay, so that happens twice, and then we're on to our G7 line. And again, we're using the three forms of G on this line, including the open strings. Okay, root inversion, root and fifth, third and root, fifth to third. Okay, and nice simple Cs. So twice we've used these simple Cs on both the G7 lines, I believe. They finish just using, the F lines. Oh yeah, all three lines end up using this simple version of C at the end. So if you look to the only line that doesn't is, even the first line. So all of them end up, when it's coming back to C, just using at the end of the lines, using the 5th fret. That's a good sort of insurance policy, if you like, from my brain anyway, to remember that. Okay, then our final line, again going down this arpeggio, and I'm going again back up to here. Previously we started on the up here, but on the D and the B strings. Okay, and we're just stepping one inversion down floor. We're starting not here, but here. Okay, so all down on the same sets of strings, much like we're going all. So this is exactly what we'd have on the 6th, going up and down through the chord forms. Do I think I could remember all of that? Let's just see if I can play through it without the backing track as a reminder. Okay, so we have wrong strings, repeated. Then for our G7s, we're going up in the same sets of strings, back to the 5th fret, same set of strings for F, blocking, repeated, okay, then we're up to our Gs, all the way up to the top. And what did I do for my G7s? Oh, I'm not sure we went through that line, did we? Let me just cut back. I'm not sure we did that properly, did we? In the edutainment part of this, did the there's the G7 bar. Sorry, so it's going down through the scale through 6th, back to G here. So here's G, G. We're just going down through what you might think of as the F part of it, because you've got F and C, G and D, F and C, but back to D and B, the part of the G chord. Sorry. So that line. Okay, let's see if I can get through that then. Once without the backing track, just to ensure I can actually remember the part. Same strings. Here's the blocking part. Repeat. Didn't block as well there, did I? G7s. Up to the top. G7. Now, wasn't really getting that pitch very nicely. Let's see how I get on with the backing track. Maybe my ear will bring things in nicely. Okay, managed to get through there with I think there was a couple of little out of tuney ones at the back end there, but not too bad. Okay, so let's go on to our final ones. The first two charts you'll notice we're really using a lot of sixths primarily. And this one is the chart that I started off with a student a few years ago, just writing the melody out for thirds for them on the top strings. So these are, there is six that come in, so there's sixth and thirds. So I thought the first, write two more for just sort of sixths as primers for those, and then throw this one in that's got a combination of both, of thirds and sixths. When I say that the other one's sixth, of course it's got fourths and fifths in it as you're moving through different inversions of the C chord there, but there was no thirds in it. There was inverted thirds, sixths. Oh, cameras have gone out of sync again. Let's just sort that out. And did the other one flash on and off? There we go. And back in. Now back in sync. Sorry about that. So, yeah, here we're going up here, 5th fret. Okay, so we've got straight line thirds from our F version, 5th root 3rd. That's the F there. So we've got the high C. So we start the melody on 3rd to 5th, up to root and 3rd from the F, 3rd and 5th from C, back down. You can think of this just as scale, moving up through thirds on the up through the strings. There's a fair bit of that in this version of it. Okay, then for G, up to 12th fret, down to next version of G down here, 5th root 3rd. Okay, and that's always a characteristic I have with these ones. And here, there, there's something about the contact on when I'm doing these sheer slants up on the top ones. I call them sheer; these are quite manageable there. But there's a contact issue with the tonality I just don't like as much. When it's on the lower strings, we've got more consistency of the tonality, but certainly when I'm playing down here with slants up on the top, look really bad, and still I get this characteristic here that is compromised in terms of how the resonance comes out. Anyway, enough whinging. That's that line there. Then we jump to sixths. Okay. 3rd, 5th, root. That's for my C chord. Okay. So G. Was a little swinging cats there. Not too bad. Okay. Okay, on to the next line. Oh, sorry, I hadn't moved that up there. Sorry about that. There's the G line, so just go through that again now. There's the actual tab, the correct tab up there. There's the G, C. Okay, on to the F lines. So we start on that F and A. Jump straight up to the straight bar version of that, down through the scale thirds, and we finish there. So that's F, 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 down through the scale, or thinking of it as G, back through F, C, F, C, C. Okay. Now when you're doing these ones, it's really easy to keep the thumb in contact with the strings here, and when I'm doing that, you can hear even if the slide is really on the strings, it's very minimal the sound that you can hear. Even if I did that, well, if I did that, it's better. So you could do a bit more palm blocking, I guess. I could improve my technique that way as I'm doing these thirds. I don't like the way my hand feels a bit more cramped into doing that when I'm doing these ones. But hey, new techniques, improvement. Anyway, with the combination of those, I'm really removing a lot of extraneous noise here. So even that sound there, I'm quite surprised as I do it now. That's this thumb touching the strings. It's just there's so much resonance still through that part. As soon as I touch the strings here, that's just the treble strings that you can hear. And I want the treble strings to ring, so that's not such a problem. But all this bass motion is nice and dead. Sixth. Okay, that line repeat. Okay, up to our G7 line, the second G7 line. I'm going to have to cut to the normal chart in a second because it's not enough space on the bottom of the page to, well, technical globals. Okay, so here we get the equivalent of what we had in the other chart was for sixths. It's the same fret positions, it's just inverted of those sixths turned back into thirds. So this is the part of G7 where I get the fifth, that 15th fret D, and the 15th fret up on the high D string, which is a B. So the 5th and the flat 7th of the chord. Back down through the G forms. Palm block, remember? And 6th. So two forms there. From 5th root 3rd, sorry, 3rd root 5th, 5th root 3rd, using the 6th that are part of that. Oh, swinging cats. Okay, so that's the gesture we've got there. Okay, final line. Just going to have to cut to the normal chart here. So that bottom line, is that two shots still composed? No, that's not the right shot. So I've got the, sorry, let me sort this shot out. Two shot, there we go. As if I was a professional. So again, this is going down through the arpeggio. This section of the tune is always just stepping down through C. Now rather than going down to here, all on the same strings, let me just swap the camera to which one we've got in the box. I think, which one's the box? Large, small. I think it should be that. No, that's that one. There we go. rather than doing them all on 3 strings, the same strings there, okay, I'm just tilting here to get the notes. I've actually gone back to the position here where I get G and E from my 3rd, 5th root form, where I'm playing the 5th and the 3rd on the B and the D strings. Okay. Okay. Then we turn around and we're at G. Did this before in one of the previous ones. Sorry. So again, there's that same, going to need to do palm blocking on this turn here. Make sure fingers are touching the strings. Okay, let's have a crack through that one. Let's have a go through that one. Yeah, so I should be able to do that. Just bring the come on. There we go. So this is the 3rd version, the last of the arrangements. Up and then try to correct it. Messy at the end there. The wrong slant there. So as I came down there, I kept the same. Sorry, I went this. Should have been. Sorry, I went this. Should have been this. And there, I'm not getting that tilt enough, and not quite palming with the other hand enough. So sometimes I'll put this little extra bit in. It's a bit like the initial refrain of the bass one. Okay, so let's just have a wee chat about those things that have transpired. So we got those 3 versions of the tune to go through. As I say, they're really designed to make kind of uses of the forms, not necessarily for the easiest way to play them. They're there as a sort of little challenge to myself and my students to find ways to move through the chord forms and get used to those to develop that slant technique. Perseverance is the only way. I mean, I'm amazed how far I've got from when I started. I mean, I remember the first time I think I heard some kind of dobro music with with slants in it, way before I was playing dobro. I remember hearing this kind of swinging cat sounds of old bluegrass guys firing into probably these sorts of slants, where you're playing fifth root third, 3 strings at a diagonal slant. And then, you know, in the fly, live recordings, them all being a bit like, ooh, that's a bit iffy. Modern eared sensibilities are not the same as they were when, when they were done originally. Either way, I remember hearing that sound and going, swing, you know, that's funky. And then so learning, starting the dobro and then realizing how difficult it was to pull them off consistently, it made the players that do it well really rocket up in my estimation. For nailing down these techniques, they're awkward, they can be uncomfortable on the wrist, and they can often go wrong. Either it's you lose control of the slide, or you're out of tune. But you know, perseverance is the only way to correct most of these things. Try and try again. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the lesson plan gone over. So we dealt with, let's just have a little reprise. Dealt with a little bit about why, you know, where I'm coming from in terms of slants. We dealt with seeing where the slants come from on this tuning in terms of looking through the primary major chord forms. Now there's similar ones for the minor ones, but the slants are still pretty much the same slants. They're just playing maybe different parts of the chords, but they're the same shapes that we're going to make. So yeah, we did some there, and then we did some just horizontally going up and down the fretboard, doing thirds and sixths. So the thirds can be replicated on the higher and lower strings. The sixths in the middle strings, they're really only set on once. But the thirds on the outside of the triad ones, either G up to the B up to the D strings, they can be done on the high and low ones. But when you're doing like from the B string to the G string or the D string to the B string, they're set. There isn't another set of relationships for those. So we went through those. Then we did them just through the chord forms, so horizontally going up and down just through the chord shapes. So all C moving up and forward and reverse slants through those. And then we went through our tunes, and then through the tunes there were some technical elements that come up about blocking, palming, anything else that pops into my head that we've gone through with that. Sure there is. Forgetful in nature by nature. Yeah. So I think I'll just leave it with playing or improvising around the backing track. I hope you find some of this helpful, whether you've been watching it live. Thanks for those that have tuned into it. It's been great to see some people doing it. It's only like the third or fourth stream. Really looking forward to trying to make some interesting other primer content. If there's anyone out there that's interested in lessons, do get in touch. Or if you've just got questions that you think you might like the way that I'm dealing with the instrument, do get in touch. GT Dobro Lessons. On this one it's not got my email. I won't faff around. Or I will faff around. Let me just get that email up on the bottom of that. Let's see. That one has not got the email on it. That one's got the email on it, the right-hand technique one. gtdobrolessonsonline@gmail.com, or you can obviously just get in touch through the Facebook group. But there's the email. So again, I'll just cut to the dobro and noodle my way out. And then at some point, it's a good 6-minute backing track. I've probably put too many repetitions through it. It's just when I was sequencing it, I just went block, 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 block. And then when I did it, I was like, oh, it's 6 minutes. But there's a little, ending to it, so it doesn't just curtail. So I hope you've enjoyed that. For those of you that are slide players, that you found some kind of interest in it. But without waffling any further, let's cut to some noodling on the instrument. Better noodling on the instrument than waffling in the mouth. Okay, I'll put that back on the actual lesson plan that we're dealing with. Slants. No, I'll take that off because I'll be noodling and I might not be doing slants.